It's an Archaeodeath interview with Professor Howard Williams and his guest. So thank you so much for joining me. And we're just going to have a chat about Vikings and politics today, which is something that very much interests me.
I mean, you're the expert. Like, thank you so much for this. I'm actually super nervous because I'm not like, I think this is a very amazing opportunity because, like, I mean, you're the expert.
Oh, well, I'm on this app to talk to people who have different expertise in different fields and different areas. So I really value this as an opportunity because I got so frustrated in the academy trying to discuss these matters because, just to give you some backstory, obviously, particularly from 2017, 2018, many more medievalists and academics started talking about the political ramifications of our field of study, which was good, but also rather frustrating for me because it's something I've been discussing for 20 years. So it was good, but then there was lots of very much, should we say, very simplistic narratives, and for me, the challenge on the good thing about social media is I'm actually finding people who've from academic backgrounds or activist backgrounds, different religions, ethnicities, seem to be much more open to having a conversation about these sensitive issues. And so I really welcome this. It's hopefully, I don't have all the answers and I don't have a perspective, and I know that you've got many different perspectives on this yourself,
my background, I have a background in education. I actually study special education, and I did a university course in Stockholm University on post-colonial perspectives on audiovisual media. But there was this book that I read in that course that actually was very curious for me because it was called White by a British professor called Richard Dyer, that he was like, everybody talks about all ethnicities, but I want to talk about white people and whiteness and the construction of whiteness. And of course, he did it from a media perspective, but from there I started to be very curious, and actually it was a very enlightening course. So that's actually my background. And I was like, wait a minute, it's important to study whiteness too. Not that many people does that, but he does it. I strongly recommend that book, but he does it from a media perspective. It's more because his PhD is in media studies, is something with media studies. I was taking a media studies course, so it was very interesting how he talked about it. So and of course, every nerd has Vikings. I actually have this book you recommend. I had it.
Oh, Caroline Larrington's Norse God, Norse Myths. Yeah. She's an Oxford professor of Norse study, Norse language and literature, and she's it's a good introduction and sort of narrative. I must say that I think a lot of Viking archaeology, history, literature scholars have been aware of nationalism and talked about nationalism a lot and national politics from the 1990s, really, particularly in archaeology, but talked less about whiteness as a phenomenon. But I don't think we can talk about Vikings and their modern political ramifications without dealing with issues of whiteness. And I agree with that, because it's I think one of the things I find is that a lot of people say, well, it's the Swedes' problem, or it's the Danes' problem, or Norwegians, but this is a global phenomenon where the Vikings are picked up everywhere from Chile to Australia. It's not about where. It's not just about national stories. It's global because of Marvel universe and everything, TV shows, video games. And the whiteness aspect is, I think, really important. I can't say it, because it does affect so many of the ways, the stereotypes, the tropes, and that feeds into pop culture, but also into political discourse, I think that's something I'm still learning about, but I think it's a really important aspect.
I just want to say that I feel so much for white people who are interested in Odinism and paganism and Norse culture that are trying to pull it away from white supremacy. I feel so much for them because they try so hard and they get so much hate. Like, actually, like the reason why we connected is because I did a video. I went to this Bronze Age museum that is in the west coast of Sweden. What is it called? Oh my god, I forgot. What is it called?
Oh, this is brilliant. Yes, I forgot this. This is how we first, you did this sort of really sharp, quick zoom around this heritage site looking for, and your idea was, oh, I'm looking for the, was it the locks, wasn't it? You were looking for locked hair. That was
yeah. And that video, because I've made videos like that before. I made one in like a history museum in Stockholm. I strongly recommend you, if you come into Stockholm as a tourist, this is my personal opinion, don't go to the Viking Museum. The Viking Museum is more like a tourist trap. The History Museum is better. The Viking Museum I think is historically accurate, but it's a little more of a tourist trap. The History Museum is really good. And also, you don't need to go to a museum to see ruins. In Stockholm, there are like a lot of ruins everywhere in Stockholm. Even like in neighborhoods, because some of the rooms are so huge that they can't be moved. And also, I strongly recommend, my second favorite is the Vasa Museum. Yes. But my favorite part is not the ship itself. It's like the reconstruction of the people who survived and who died in the shipwreck.
Yes.
It's done by this very famous Swedish, what's his name? That he's very famous by doing like this type of archaeological reconstruction.
Oh, right. I remember seeing that. I've been to both, but it was last time I was in Stockholm was about 12 years ago. So it's not recently. And I know they've redone the National History Museum. I haven't been to the Viking Museum, but I've been to the Vasa and a number of times. It's just amazing. Absolutely amazing. Yeah.
Oh, it's Tanum. Is Tanum. They have these rock carvings that are super old, that they're part of like World Heritage.
Yes.
And
on the west. Yeah.
They are amazing. Like, if you have the opportunity to go, they're worth it. So that's where I made, because I've made a few videos going to museums here in Stockholm looking for dreadlocks, and some of them went viral, but that one was the one who actually went super, super viral. And a lot of people got offended. I'm like, well, you can get offended, but I'm not lying. I'm still looking for the dreadlocks.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing that I mean, it's really funny. I mean, let's talk about locks, for example, because, you know, honestly, as an academic who studies this period, you know, I haven't ever put a lot of effort into looking at hairstyles, because hairstyles are one of the most difficult things to discuss. And so when people started saying, I remember seeing a video about 10 years ago, someone going, some white American guy going on about Viking, you know, locked hair. And I was going, I wasn't sure, even as an expert, I wasn't sure where this was coming, because it's always something I've missing, and I've never actively researched hair. So I always assumed, you know, and this is the thing, even if you're an expert in the field or a field linked to it, you always assume that someone's got something, you know, you don't, as an academic, you don't go, oh, well, I know everything about this. Therefore, if someone says to you with their whole chest, you know, with honesty, well, there's this evidence, I tend to go, okay, and then I go and look and reflect and read. So when I heard this, I thought, that's a bit weird, but I don't know where to go to find out where they're getting this from. It's like another of these things that floats around popular culture. You can't anchor it. You can't, you know, find out the angles. And so it was only 3 years ago on TikTok that I thought I'd address this issue, because I saw literally comment sections full of people claiming, yeah, we've got evidence of Viking locked hair. And then I saw people doing posts, not all Americans, but some of them Americans, you know, doing this whole, yeah, we've got this, here's this, and then the evidence they're presenting, then I can pick up and go, that's bullshit, you know. And here I but until you get that evidence, or they're just going, oh, here's a general popular website where some random journalist says it. And so I think it's really important, because a lot of people out there feel if you just talk authoritatively, you must know there must be something somewhere. And I confess, and that's what the point I'm making is, even though I claim to be an expert in the field, there's always things I'm missing out evidence for. And so if someone says to me, oh yeah, you know, we've got evidence for, you know, this, I'll go, okay. I won't go, no. And so it takes time for me to do the research to find out where they're getting their nonsense from, where they're getting their misinformation from. to then explain it. And so, yeah, I feel TikTok's really good for, I feel late to everything. I feel about 10 years behind or 5 years behind what everyone else thinks they know. And then I've got to try and catch up. And I go, oh, yeah. And, sometimes I am learning stuff from the public. The public have read something and it's correct. I've just never studied it before. And I go, oh, yeah, now I know about that. But sometimes, of course, as with Locked Hair, it's great to see people who aren't experts, by your own description, who are out there doing videos that are just kicking ass, just pushing back against this bullshit and pushing back against these now, because otherwise, we can't do it alone, And I've done recent conversations with experts in parts of the Viking world that I'm not an expert on, and I said, are you aware of this myth? Are you aware of this story, this pseudo-archaeology, pseudo-history online about the, I can't remember what it was. It was about that Christianity, genocided the pagan Norse. Like Christians were like, in Scandinavia, were like some kind of Hollywood bad guy. They all came and slaughtered thousands, like it was like, and I said, where did you know about this? And it's all, and you go, where's this coming from? How, because if you're immersed in the sources and the academic debates, you won't even know about these discussions. So it's really important. There are people who are actually paying attention to the misinformation, and I'm learning. But it's a tough job. So well done. I really loved that video and the other ones you did, and because no one else is doing this, and so many people will be going to, or hundreds of people will be videoing themselves going around a site going, hey guys, here I am, look at this cool thing, here's me. And 1 in 100 will go, this is good, making a point out of it. So
it's so sad because like the whole dreadlocks discussion, I'm so tired because we know what it is. You're still gonna wear dreadlocks anyway. But you know what? Let's pretend for a second that Vikings wore dreadlock. You're not a Viking. You're from Ohio, okay? Just deal with it. You're from Ohio. I'm sorry. You're from Utah. Because like I live in Utah, and there's so many people that I've met in Utah that they took a DNA test, and because the DNA test said they were 10% Norse or 5% Norse, because like Mormons are very obsessed with like genealogy and track their genealogy, so they're very obsessed with that. They did it before it was cool. Okay, they did it before it was cool, you could say. And I'm like, dude, you're not a Viking. You don't have any connection. Like Vikings are dead like hundreds of years ago. Like you don't even know where Scandinavia is in a map. Like please, and it's like it's taking the cosplay. Like cosplaying is fun. We all do cosplaying, but it's like they take it to the extreme. Okay. And about the Vikings and the horns, I think it was like, wasn't it like Richard Wagner who kind of created that myth with
his costume designer, yeah,
with his operas, because he was obsessed with Vikings.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he was explicitly a white supremacist. I know his daughter was, I think, his daughter or his granddaughter. And I know the funny guy with a mustache, the failed Austrian painter with the funny mustache, he was obsessed with Wagner. Yeah. So, like, I don't know if that's where, like, the connection started it. But, yeah, and also I think, like, now that you mentioned the 90s and all of this, like groups obsessed with Vikings and Christianity, I remember, because I used to listen to a lot of metal, so I remember, like, in the 90s, in Norway, there was like this a wave of black metal, and if there's some Norwegians in the audience, I hope this doesn't offend you, but I believe Bathory invented black metal. Bathory invented black metal. So Bathory started to use a lot of elements of like Vikings and Old Norse mythology there, which is okay because he was Swedish. It's there's nothing wrong with that. But then the black, he started it in the 80s, but then the black metal wave in Norway of the 90s was very white supremacist, and they start burning historical Christian churches in Norway. They burn like 50, I think, if I'm not mistaken, like very beautiful old Christian churches. And one of the most famous one was Bark Vikernes. His name was Christian, and he changed it to Bark, which is wolf in Norwegian, if I'm not mistaken, because it's similar to how because I know wolf in Swedish is bari, so bari, yeah. So he went to prison because he killed another metal musician, but he was a very like he went to prison because he killed another metal musician, and I think he like he encouraged that burning of churches and that rejection of Christianity as a form, and embracing like Odinism as a form of white supremacists. And he's now, he got out of prison, and because he committed that crime, he was very young. He was 16, so he was very young when he started this movement. And he's not. He was. I think he was very young. He was very, very young. And he's now like openly white supremacist, openly Nazi, and Odinist, and he takes that interpretation from there, and you go down that rabbit hole, and a lot of bands. But that's like, this is not about the history of black metal, but yeah, talking about that wave in the 90s that happened in Norway in the 90s too, like that burning of churches. Yeah, he's very active on Twitter. He's very active on social media. He's insane. He's really, really insane. But he was always like that. But not everybody who produced Viking-inspired music was white supremacist. I don't think Bathory was white supremacist. But Bark Vikernes took his hate for Christianity and Odinism as a base of his white supremacy and his political ideology.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have, I mean, the thing I find in both, it's important to clarify for a lot of people. I'm not going to make a massive deal out of it because it shouldn't be when we're talking about cultural manifestations, it doesn't mean literally, there's a lot of ignorance. There's a lot of people who just go along and don't really critically engage. And there are the people at the outright, characters like that, but there's a lot of people who just don't get it. So when I'm talking about some of these issues, it's so easy for these characters to hide with this, why, there's nothing wrong with it, it's just me expressing my heritage. And a lot of people go, yeah, what's wrong with him? All he's doing is listening to a bit of music, and it's very difficult to explain this story. And a lot of, as you say, a lot of people who are either want to be assigned to Norse paganism or Norse heathenry are actively anti-racist, and they're doing great work, and it's not their problem alone. It's a broader societal problem because it's not just those groups. It's Christian groups. It's anyone can be drawn in. It doesn't have to be a religious affinity. It can be we have a lot of overlaps with eco movements and outdoors, those kind of right-wing people who sit in caves in Norway and do YouTube videos with long beards, who think, I don't know if they're pagan or Christian or whatever, but they're just like, oh, you weak, you weak people in America, you need to live in a cave like me. Well, I only live here 5 minutes a day while I'm doing a YouTube video. The rest of the time I'm in my massive house, but that kind of, it's just rhetoric of aesthetic, isn't it? It's the aesthetic, it's the masculinity, hyper masculine, and the music can be one aspect, but it can be also just there's a lot of different aspects to it.
Yeah, totally. And someone messaged that not all the churches were burned. No, they were like arson attacks. Yeah, you're totally right. I apologize. I mean, I was in the 90s. I was born in 87, so I don't have. But thank you so much for the correction. Yeah, and of course, this is not a conversation about black metal, because if you talk about like black metal and paganism, that's a whole different thing. But yeah, I think it's very, very important to mention it, since you mentioned the 90s. But it's so funny though, because race is a construct, and the way how the whiteness of Scandinavians have been portrayed has changed throughout time. For example, there's this famous essay by Thomas Jefferson where he describes Swedes as non-white. So this essay he wrote, it was, what is the name of the essay? Thomas. Yeah, it's online. You can Google it.
I didn't know about this. Jefferson was a bit, you know,
Yeah, he was
Jefferson
horrible.
dallied with lots of Anglo-Saxon craziness as well. But
Yeah, he was super Anglo-Saxon. So this essay, it was, oh my God, I read the essay. It was like about peopling and things. What was the name of the essay? So he, in the essay, it's very short. You can find it online. I'm gonna look for the name of the essay right now. It's really, really interesting. I read it. It's very short. It's just like one page. You read it in like 5 minutes. So I'm looking for the essay because I actually used that essay for a video, and I have it somewhere. You can find it online. Oh my God, where is the essay? Oh my God. Okay. Let me see. Jefferson.
You're right.
essay.
The point is, while you're looking for that, I'll just say that the whole point is that this idea of whiteness is constantly fluctuated, and many of the people that we now, or at least from an American framing, are categorized as white have never been white. It's been increasingly, fluctuating, and from a British perspective, the Irish were never, by many commentators, I mean, most of this was rhetorical. They don't really, but in terms of, they're never seen as white at all. The Irish are, and the Welsh too, so it's these layers of different,
Yeah, so the name of the essay is Observations Concerning the Increase of Mankind. It was by Thomas Jefferson, and he wrote that of mankind, peopling, well, my English is not very good, peopling of other countries, etc. So in the essay that he writes, he recognizes as the only true white people Anglo-Saxons. He was very very obsessed with it. And he describes Swedes and Norwegians as not white. And then, but then when you read how the Austrian funny guy with a mustache, the Austrian painter, who, I don't want to say his name because I don't want life taken down. In their laws, they consider them super white. So it's like, because race is a construct. It depends how the political discourse changes. So it's like it's really, really interesting, totally. And so like, as you mentioned, maybe Vikings back then, they didn't even know what white was. They didn't know what white was. We didn't know.
No, I think that's the whole point. We've got no direct source material. We have. Someone mentioned it that colorism was an integral part of Norse religion. The Lay of Rig has been used to suggest a kind of proto division of society, an origin myth for the classes of thralls and farmers and aristocrats, according to fairness. But I think it's a bit of a reach to presume that they were talking about, when they're talking about dark and light, that they're talking about different regimes of cleanliness, and being indoors was a sign of status. So lighter skin did have a value, a perceived positive value. But I think it's a bit of a reach extending that to claim that we have conclusive evidence that Scandinavian or Norse-speaking society of the 8th to 11th century had a strong sense of colorism. I think that's a real reach, in my opinion. But other scholars have been trying to talk about that. But it's certainly a far way from what we start to see the origins of racialization in later medieval Europe, which underpins the early modern, real roots of global racialization as a concept. And I know it's an evolving and shifting function. Coral makes a really good point about the Irish being racialized as became white in the USA. Yes, their whiteness was, I would say, qualify that slightly from my limited reading, is that there were commentators in British mid-Victorian literature, like Thomas Carlyle, who were calling the Irish white, but white apes. So the idea is that he sees them as akin to primitives, not even human. And obviously this is rhetorical, but it's reflecting a real world discourse going on in that early early mid-Victorian racialization, obsession with categorization, and biologically defining it in a way that hadn't really happened in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. And so the Irish were sort of on the cusp of becoming white, but only in skin tone, but not in behaviours, which was very much still seen as, almost akin to the savages. This is the, you can concede something on complexion, but not on behaviour. And so there's that horrible midpoint there. Yeah. Anyway, I think I agree with you. I'm just saying that I think there's that pernicious sort of derogatory anti-Irish discourse is really fervent and feeding into how other peoples are perceived. Yeah. But I don't know about Scandinavia, but I certainly would say that the one of the problems I find online, and I don't know if you have a view on this, as obviously being in Stockholm, is this idea that, and it still comes through, even when people are criticising this, they're saying, oh, well, the Vikings are our problem. And I try to make the point that you may not like people in Utah and Ohio claiming Vikings, and I may not like it, but at the end of the day, we've got to be careful, because at one level we've got to say, well, this is stories for everyone. It's so popular, we can't put it back in the box and say, oh, it's coming from only one part of the world anymore. I don't know how you feel about that, because you're surrounded by museums and runestones. Do you feel it is something that should be seen as Norwegian and Swedish and Danish, or do you think it, what do you think on that?
I don't know. I think that's something that Scandinavians should answer, because I'm Dominican. Of course, according to the Swedish constitution, I am a Swede, but I am Dominican. I just say I'm Swedish on TikTok to upset the racist trolls, and I like to show them my Swedish passports and speak to them in Swedish. But I don't know. I think that's something that Swedes and Norwegians and Scandinavians need to decide themselves. I personally believe, I see it as the problem is that when it doesn't become harmless fun, like for example, the way people treat Viking lore is not the same way people treat Greek lore, because Greek lore is more except for Greeks maybe, but people who are not Greek don't go out and pretend to be Greeks. They don't go out and use Greek mythology as an excuse to be racist, and we all have had, if you've been a nerd, you have had a phase where we're obsessed with Greek mythology and Greek lore. But that's the problem that I think that makes it so harmful from my perspective. Maybe I'm wrong, and I want Scandinavians in the comment to correct me if I'm wrong. It's they take it to an extreme. When I was at my peak of Greek mythology obsession, I would never in a million years go on social media and insult a Greek person just because they don't fit my idea of what a Greek person should be. And that's what I see, that a lot of these Scandinavians who are for example, or not only Scandinavians, just paganists that are trying to take Viking culture and Viking lore and Norse mythology away from white supremacy, they get bullied and harassed, which is insane. Because white supremacists see that as something that it's theirs. Just why can't you just be a normal nerd and enjoy it like everyone else? Why do you have to go on an arc with professors that are experts? Why do you get so offended as a black person walking in a museum and enjoying because or look, why do you get, you know what I mean? And it's people that's the thing.
So the question I have, it's a really tough question, but I don't know if you've got an answer, but it's a question for everyone in the comment section as well. Do the Vikings as a term, a pop term, right, with all the qualifications, I don't want anyone in the comments to say, oh, but Vikings is a job, right? We know, we don't know. Also, we're talking about popular modern perceptions of the Vikings, 8th to 11th century Scandinavians and Viking networks, from North Atlantic right to Russian river systems. Okay, we know that. Let's not get into that. What I'm asking about is, are the Vikings today used in Scandinavia against minorities, against immigrants, as a dog whistle, meaning white? Is Vikings a way of nod and a wink? Oh, white, or is that unfair of me to see it that way?
Yeah, I'm in Sweden. I will say yes and no. Yes, I will say in Sweden, yes, absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that, because I actually have a note on that. Yes, we have Sverigedemokraterna. Sverigedemokraterna, or the Sweden Democrats, they are a far-right party that was born from the Nazi movement in the 80s. Their first logo in the 80s, the first logo they used was a Viking man, and I'm gonna show you. I don't know if I can turn my camera. This was, I don't know.
There should be ability. You should be able to flip it if you go into your settings at the bottom, I think.
Okay, I'm gonna flip it now.
If you go, but there are 3 dots on the bottom. You can flip camera top.
This was their first logo. This was their first logo.
Oh my God.
Yeah, this was their first logo from the 80s, which means keep Sweden Swedish, which is a Viking man. At least they didn't use the horns.
Yeah.
Now they don't have that logo. Now they have like this ugly flower. They're more populist. They have changed their strategy to look more like harmless and populist. But yes, this was actually their first logo, a Viking man. Then we also have the Nordic Resistance Movement. The Nordic Resistance Movement is a pan-Nordic neo-Nazi movement in the Nordic Sweden, and it's a political party here in Sweden. And their symbol is this rune. That's their symbol, right?
Yeah.
And not everybody. So yeah, that they use that.
So they're basically picking up on the 1930s, 40s. This is sort of 3rd, 4th generation neo-Yahtzee. Basically very overt.
This Yahtzee group is active. So
Vikings. Yeah.
So Sverigedemokraterna, they don't use this symbol anymore, or the Sweden Democrats, they don't use this symbol anymore. But the Nordic Resistance Movement, which is a Yahtzee movement, and they, in some, and here, why are they allowed to be a political party? I don't know, but they were banned in Finland. They use this rune. So if you see this flag, this waving flag, run. Run, just run. And so
but in their conversations, right, they're co-opting these symbols, right? But is it beyond the extremists? Are people talking about Vikings as a dog whistle for white or Swedish as in non-immigrant? Is that
sadly? I mean, some have tried, but in my opinion, sadly, it is, and especially I think here it has happened also, the appropriation of Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. So yes, I think in the social discourse, the Sweden Democrats, they have moved away from the Nordic symbolism, at least in public opinions, but a lot of their members, they still use it. And they're trying to appropriate not only like Viking and Norse culture, but also like Swedish culture in general. But I personally think is a lot of a dog whistle, especially if you see someone with a Mjolnir tattoo, or if you see someone with like runes tattoos, that becomes a dog whistle. That's something that, I'm not saying everybody who has a Mjolnir necklace is a Nazi, but you should be concerned. That's my personal opinion and my personal experience, not also based on what I've seen, but also on evidence, because we have movements here that use and have used historically Viking symbolism. And also here in Sweden, there is a branch of Asatru Folk Assembly. I don't know if you guys know what Asatru Folk Assembly is, but it's like a religion that is white supremacist, that is only like white people that can join, that they mix like paganism and Old Norse. It's very weird. But there's also, they're very small here, ironically. They're very, very small. But I will say that for here it's kind of a dog whistle, which is sad. But not everybody who's like interested in Viking culture is necessarily a dog whistle. Again, there's a lot of museums, so there's runes. But if they have like a Mjolnir necklace, if they have like runes tattoos, then you should be a little, I will say those specific things.
But it's important to say, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that this is also, it's a very Christian identifying right movement.
Oh, Sweden is very Christian. That's something that people really don't understand. Of course, it's not, I think, I wouldn't say it's like that everybody here is very religious, but traditionally and culturally speaking, Sweden is Christian. Even those who don't believe in God, they follow like Christian traditions. Like Lucia is a very popular celebration in Sweden. Um, Also, there's a lot of people who, even though they're not Christians necessarily, they like to be part of the Church of Sweden and pay taxes. They see the Church of Sweden, the Protestant church, as something positive. So, yeah, so even though not everybody is religious, but culturally speaking, Sweden is a very Christian country. Yes, it is.
So do you think, I mean, outside of the sort of internet tropes of claiming locked hair, claiming chin lines, those kind of things that do global cultural offence and cultural appropriation, from a more sort of Swedish perspective, do you think, are there bigger problems? Are there, I mean, than that kind of claims to? Is it more? Is it, you know? I'm not trying to make light of it, because these things do real harm, particularly to indigenous communities. But is there more tangible problems that, you know, affect real world scenarios than simply whether you have a tattoo or not, or whether you like a
Yeah,
particular
of
kind of
course,
music or not?
totally. Yeah, and I don't think I've never met, I don't think Swedes claim that Vikings had box braids or dreadlocks. I've never met. If they do it, it's because they like it, or because I don't know, whatever. That's another discussion. But no, I don't think like I mean, even like no, I don't think they do. I don't think. I mean, I think it will be very hard for you to meet a person, at least in Sweden, that will die on that hill of saying that Vikings wore dreadlocks. You know, I don't think so. I don't think
So,
so.
it's more about behaviours and attitudes rather than physical symbols, anyway. And you know, if the far right parties are moving forwards to pretty flowers, they know that is they're always adapting. They know that is a
Yeah,
way to
because I
live.
think they moved to that pretty flower because they wanted to show like a more like clean version and be more, because they moved to be more populist. They still have those ideas, but they have become more populist. But yes, but at the beginning, that's how they started it and how they had that symbolism. But we still have like the Nordic resistance movement that has that the rune. That rune is their main symbol, and of course like races that have like, you know, those symbols. Especially their favorite one is the Mjolnir, Mjolnir, you know. But yeah, but like I mean, they still have those ideas, and I think it's very dangerous. But yeah, I will say that. I will definitely say that. Yeah,
So,
totally.
what do you think we can do better or more of? I'd love to hear your views, because I know that many of my academic colleagues simply won't go on social media anymore and try and educate, because they're so affected by the drama and the abuse and the threats and stuff. And those that do either just want to make categorical statements all the time, you know, like they you know, I don't know. I wonder whether you have any thoughts on whether we're doing anything constructive. I mean, academic, you are, because you, as I said about your videos. But I mean, are academics doing enough? Do you think, or are we doing the wrong kind of thing?
Well,
About,
I'm not part of the academic world,
I
so
know,
I don't know. I think everybody brings their own bias, and I think bias is good. But I think also people bring their own ideas and beliefs and how they romanticize how things were. I think like the best thing is not only to be honest, but also make things accessible, because not everybody has access to those discussions that happen in academic
yeah,
fields.
yeah.
So I remember that I was watching this interview. It was for something else, for this historian that was talking about this uh, uh, um, Spanish colonial authority that during the colonial times when they were like colonizing my country, he committed a horrible crime. And he said, I think he regretted what he did. And I'm like, that's what you think, but you're not showing any sources saying that he regretted. Of course he doesn't regret it. What sources show that he was very horrible. So I think like just be honest and keep going and try to understand like why. Because like that's something that I want to ask you to Professor. Why do you think like white supremacists are so obsessed with Vikings? Because I understand why they're obsessed with Romans, because Roma was a huge empire, and like historically a lot of like dictators and white supremacists and identitarians have been obsessed with the Roman and empire, and also there's been this whitewashing of the Roman Empire. But why do you think like they're so obsessed with Vikings? Because Vikings, they weren't, compared to other like cultures in Europe, they weren't that huge. Am I wrong, maybe? Or
Well, I think but before I answer that, I want to sign up. I want to respond to one comment, quickly, because I think it's important. I can't see, or maybe I've lost it now. But I saw a comment saying that academia has sort of covered for racism for a long time, and I think that is true. Because I mean, one of the things that, yes, Becky says, academia has been covering racism and promoting white supremacy, and I think by passive, you could make an argument that we do that by passive, just, oh, it's too dirty and too political for us to deal with. There's that passive, that's below us, we won't get involved. But there's also an argument I've seen people make, not always, but that we have been sharing a view. We've been promoting a lot of the shit that then becomes the popular memes and we've created a lot of this. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. And so I think one of the reasons why, to answer your question, Mango Podcast, is one of the reasons why I think Vikings are so popular, not only in the Nordics, but also broadly, is that they can be so many different things. They can be the worst enemy you fought against and won. They can be the protagonist. They can be the antagonist. They can be the heroes. They can be a bit silly. They can be a bit ridiculous. They can be really violent. They can be really brave and adventurers. There's into that Viking label, you can push hyper masculine men, hyper feminine women, housewives, warrior women. It works for men and women. There's so many stylized tropes, but one of the things that I think is really important to remember, it's not the only thing, is that even though it doesn't make any rational sense, even though it doesn't make any historical sense, the Viking Age sits as a kind of pivot on a seesaw, or a fulcrum between prehistory, which is all of the time leading up to about the year 1000, right? And the Christian Middle Ages and what comes from that. So it's a kind of exciting time because it's just before history in a full, rich sense, which is Christian and kingdoms and authority and power. And it's just after this, not my understanding, I'm saying in popular conception, I know it's not this, the millennia of primitive times. So it's the people who lived in the Viking Age are on that cusp of history. They're becoming civilized. And the Vikings are a kind of, if you want to use a Hollywood movie, they're a story arc of redemption from pagan to Christian. You can see them as bad, but also good. They're anti-heroes and heroes. And so, and then this is why white fantasists love it, because it's a time before, and the other thing is it's a time before people of color. That's not true, but that is a little safe space where they can go and imagine a nice happy time where we just simply went out raiding and I don't mean me, I mean but where society was simple. It's like a 1950s trad wives, but in the Viking Age. But so I suppose my 2 points are, it's seductive because anything can be Viking, anyone can be Viking, and also it's a time before the worries of the modern world, where some people can imagine the ills of the modern world, which are all from immigrants, don't take place. The problem is, of course, by definition, the Viking world is all about trade, exchange, enslavement, missionaries.
Yeah,
you can't have a Viking Age without any of those cultural exchanges. But it's utterly paradoxical. But you have to be a racist to make it work. That's the point.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so happy you mentioned that, because you're the experts at how they see reality. Yeah, they were traders. They also like how they, because like according to this book, like I strongly recommend this book. It's really good. Like the old Norse you see in this book is so different from the old Norse that white supremacists imagine, because it's so colorful and it's so fun, and it's like the gods are so fun, and also like they're complex. They get angry, but they fall in love. They're very complex also. I mean, that's what I interpreted from the book. I don't know if I'm wrong. Like here, there's a statue of Odin wearing women's clothes when I think he wore women's clothes to get like the secrets. No, he hung himself from the Yggdrasil tree to get the secrets of the runes, but he one time like wore women's clothes to get something from someone, and one time like Thor dressed as a woman for a wedding, I think. So there's all of this, like it's not that serious.
No.
There's a lot of fun.
I mean, that's why people get very angry at me when I say that Thor: Love and Thunder is probably the most accurate of the Marvel representations, and it's actually not because anything in it looks like how anyone in the Viking Age imagined their gods to look, but the fun, the ridiculousness. A lot of this was for entertainment in a hall. Of course, people believed it and they wanted to gain moral guidance off it, and like all stories have, but it is intended to be ridiculous and fun and self-mocking. And I think that people have to, I think like anything, I think people, let me take it away from Vikings, talk more broadly. The people that take the distant past very seriously are either people who are super nerdy, and there's people in the comments section who like spend their life dedicated to napping flints, who I'm going to talk to Craft in the Past next week about his flint napping. Craft of the Past is wonderful, but and I hope he doesn't mean, I mean nerdy in a positive way. They're hyper focused on a specific thing, or there's a red flag going on. There's something, they're taking it way too seriously. If you really get into an argument about who won, which side of the Battle of Stiklestad you would have fought on, you're taking it all a little too seriously. This isn't like 20th century history where there are living descendants of people affected by genocide, by diaspora. This is something that happened over 1,000 years ago. If you're that passionate about it, there's something wrong, so I love it. I'm part of the problem, because I think, and this is where academics forget, it's just because we're really interested in specific issues that went on over 1,000 years ago, we forget that there's a popular interest in this can be really passionate, but can be deeply dangerous, because people do get into arguments about who side of the Battle of Hastings you'd be on, or what what would you done if a Christian turned up at your door to tell you to accept Christianity in whatever year, as if, and people get very passionate about this, and this is something deeply wrong if you don't see the humor in the past, and you don't see that, compared with all the terrible things going on in the world at the moment, which actually are
exactly, because there's a distance. That's another thing. There's a distance not only in time but also in ideology, because whatever ideological system was happening back then, we don't know, it's not affecting us nowadays. Now we have white supremacy, now we have all of these systems, colonialism, imperialism. So there's a difference, because yes, those systems still affect us. There's a continuum that is still happening, but exactly. And it's like, and people are like feel also very disappointed when they see photos of how Vikings actually dress, how Norse people actually dress. It's not like this weird. I think I watched the show Vikings. The show Vikings was very fun, but I think also the show Vikings did a lot of harm to an extent, because they didn't use dreadlocks in the show, and they show like a part of the show. They show like when Vikings met Muslims. There's a part of the show.
Oh, that bit was I've done blogs about that show, and I was
shocked. I was like, wait, what?
But that bit, I couldn't believe what they did there. Sorry, I had to interrupt. Sorry, forgive me.
Yeah, it was very fun. And then, I think they did a lot of good things this show, and they mixed like myths with, but also, and no one in the show wore dreadlocks, but like I think the show did also a lot of harm because they use a lot of the things in the show as evidence, and they stretch it, and I'm like we don't know, we don't we don't know. But yeah, and that part of that shocked me a lot, the part about the Muslims, and because I think they found here in Uppsala. In Uppsala, there's a lot of like archaeological sites, and they found a ring that said Allah.
Yeah.
And they thought they think it was like maybe it was a result of plunder. Other things it wasn't a result of plunder. So, and also like Africa and the Middle East is not that far also either. It's very close. So
They would
it
have
was
been
very,
exposed
very
to.
interesting.
They would have been exposed to the Christian and Muslim worlds, for centuries. There was never a time, and that's what I try to keep reminding people, is that the contacts with the Muslim world, we go back to the beginnings of the Muslim world, to the 7th and 8th centuries, and it's I'm not saying they were all converting to Christianity or Islam en masse, but it takes a long time, and Christianity is the religion that has the network that makes. But they would have been exposed to these ideas, and I think in some ways the TV show does try to show that, right? It does try in a simplistic way, but you can't take it as literal, as if it was it's the Norse myths, a guide to the gods and heroes by Caroline Larrington, Larrington.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And also what someone's mentioning, like they travel, that it wasn't everything about plundering. I mean, maybe they were assholes, I don't know. But yeah, that's also another thing that people get very offended when you talk about, like, no, they also did other things. People get very, very
I think my take on the past is I don't want to go back. They were all arseholes. There's no point arguing who was a bigger arsehole. They were all horrible. People are. No, that's my default as an archaeologist. My point is, I think one of the problems with even the discussions of the Vikings is this achievement narrative. And I want to read from a book. I don't want to name and shame, but I'm going to anyway, because it's a good book, Ancient Scandinavia. I just recommended it on my channel, T. Douglas Price. But this goes from the earliest times in Scandinavia. He's a good archaeologist. I'm not doubting his credentials, but I just want to read where the problem lies, right? So he's introducing the Viking Age, right, 750 to 1050, and there's lots of good in this. It's not wrong. It's not like he's writing fantasy, but I just want to give you a paragraph of the first section of this chapter, the final paragraph. Explanations for the Viking expansion have invoked population growth, polygamy, and primogeniture, political unrest at home, favourable climatic conditions, ship design, the wealth of Anglo-Saxon Britain, and an adventurous spirit, among other possibilities. That's the first long sentence. So he's just talking about the general reasons why the Viking Age happened. Second sentence. A generally accepted view at one time was that petty chieftains from Western Norway immigrated to Iceland to escape the growing power of Norway's first unifying king, Harald Fairhair. Okay, he doesn't comment on that. And then the third sentence is, whatever the causes, the Norse colonization of the North Atlantic was a remarkable achievement. And I know this is a popular introduction, but that kind of honorific, that absolutely wetting his pants to say something good about the Vikings is what you find on TV shows. Historians do it all the time. Walking to camera. The Vikings did this. The Vikings are the agents. They're the ones doing anything. If you did this about the British in India today, without any qualification, the way people talk about the Vikings, if you talk about, I don't know, the French in North Africa, if you talked in the same way, people would laugh you out. They'd say, you're not in the 1950s
it depends
anymore.
on the context. You will be surprised. People talk about the Spaniards in what they did in Latin America in kind of that way. So you will be surprised. Actually, you will be surprised.
Okay, so they do, but my point is they're still seeing them as a kind of, and this is one of the key reasons why white supremacists love them, is that they are seen as proto-European merchant adventurers, right?
Yes.
So they are like not the biological ancestors, they are the spiritual ancestors of a proto-capitalism, a proto-expansionist military force. You can see them as a bit bad, a bit good, but deep down you kind of love that they did it. You say, oh yeah, they were really harsh, but they were a bit roguish, but we'll like them. And it was a TV show about 9 years ago where British historian and presenter Dan Snow, with the most chiseled jaw and he was standing on a reproduction longship talking about Eric the Red. And he called Eric the Red, who obviously found and settled Greenland, he called him an entrepreneur. He wasn't and his point was, this idea that he was like a modern businessman. He was like he took risks. He didn't pay his employees much. He exploited them all, but he kind of made a big successful load of money. And that kind of honouring, people will fall over. It's like the people who love Elon Musk, the people who love these, what's the bull guy who does Amazon? People who
Bezos.
literally love these guys because they are Bezos. That's it. They're absolutely culting. It's like that. The Vikings are not just badass warriors. They're also proto Musks, proto Bezoses, proto, the Apple dude. They're like people love to see them as kind of the earliest businessmen out there, buying a slave, selling some furs, making some money in that kind of and so I think there's a capitalist grift on Vikings that people forget. They are proto-capitalists in the popular vision, not in reality, in our so I think that's part of the problem is we just love Vikings as merchants as well as warriors,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
like,
something that you agree with or not. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you actually. I totally agree with you. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And yeah, people in some context people still talk that way about colonizers, about the Spaniards, about the Portuguese, I mean, there's still people. I mean, one time I got very angry at my post-colonial perspective on audiovisual media class because they invited a guest lecturer and he said, well, there's good aspects of colonialism. And I got very angry. I told him to fuck off. I literally called him out. It's like, how dare you to come and say that here? Are you insane? What do you mean positive aspects? What do you mean we should be? It's insane. And me growing up, I went to a Catholic school and not Spanish tons. They were like, oh, we taught you the language. Spanish is my native language. We taught you the language, whatever. So yeah, I think so I totally agree with you. That was a brilliant analysis of putting it together. I mean, of course, because you are a professor, so it's not. It must be very easy for you. But yeah, I totally agree with you 100%, and also because there's this aura of mysticism that they put around Vikings, like the right way of being like this. Like, I don't know, they also put a lot of mysticism and like, I don't know how to explain it. Like they see them as like superhumans and this aspirational like whiteness that can exist outside of Christianity, that is like powerful and things like that. So that I totally agree with that.
So one of the things that I'm really interested in your take on is particularly when it comes to modern politics and Swedish representations. And I don't know if this is something you feel comfortable talking about, but I'm interested in the gender angle because what people I think get wrong a lot. This is my take. You can disagree with this. What I think a lot of people don't understand about the Vikings is so much about our fantasies and myths about the Vikings. While most of the myths and legends are about male gods, and while most of our stereotypical Vikings are male, a lot of the conversation pivots around the identity of women in the Viking Age, of our visions, our idealizations of women as sort of like girl bosses, as this kind of white feminist sort of fantasy of, but then we were freer and, we sometimes were warriors. We were sometimes caused massive arguments that lasted generations, but that we can take the saga literature, we can take the archaeology, we can mash it together and we can find some really empowering white female role. And on one level, I'm not saying that's all bad, but equally, you see where I'm going with this. This is part of that racialized discourse.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's
totally.
something that chimes, or you think is perhaps I've misunderstood.
It's very interesting because in the political sense, women. Okay, there's something very funny about Swedish politics, women and white supremacy. Unlike the US, women in Sweden, especially women that are 40 years and younger, are less likely to vote for the far right. They're less likely to vote for the far right. It was so evident that like even like the Sweden Democrats, they were complaining about it like openly, like, oh, the reason why women don't vote for us is because they're sentimental, they're not very smart. They openly said it. So it's so ironic because I totally agree with you because like usually like women that participate in this like far right Viking universe, they see it very differently like women that are like a Viking culture and Freya and the Valkyries from a more white feminist liberal perspective because they're more submissive. Like the conservative ones are more submissive, following the man and things like that. But what both sides get wrong is that it's more complex than that. You know, like we have which one was the Valkyrie that was like that fell in love and was jealous. Like they're more complex. There it's
Yeah.
not neither or the other. It's like it's complex.
Yeah.
So that's how I see it. Like ironically, the women that are more, this is maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe outside, they try to portray a more independent um, a show to attract women, but in reality, they're more submissive as the ones that get like this girl boss inspiration from Valkyries and women, you know, Norse and things like that.
Okay.
That's how I see it personally because
that's
for
good.
example
That's
going
interesting.
back to for example the Nordic resistance movement, I know they have like I've never seen women. I mean, you barely see women when they march. There's not that many women marching with them. Maybe they don't allow them. I don't know. I don't know much about the Nordic resistance movement. If someone can
Well,
correct me if I'm wrong.
it's been said
And
to me.
Sverige,
Oh,
yeah,
go.
and
I read
Sverigedemokraterna. Yes,
no,
sorry.
sorry, I didn't want to you finish what you're saying, please.
Oh, and I was just gonna say that the Sweden. Those are the two parties and the two. I'm trying to think in more concrete examples. And the Sweden Democrats, even though they have the few female members that they have are very vocal, they don't have that many female members either. So yeah, what were you gonna say? Sorry, Professor.
I've recently read a paper, and I'm not sure it's out yet, but it's by a Swedish archaeologist, and I'm not sure it's out yet, but so I won't cite it. So and therefore don't take what I say as accurate. But I think they were trying to make a contrasting point between how far right politics uses the Vikings between America and Britain and Sweden, where if I remember rightly, they were saying that women in Swedish far right Viking fantasies are. It's about their. Let me get this right. It's about their status and kind of their rights, whereas in British and American it's about their sexuality, and particularly the argument they were trying to make the argument, I don't know if this is true, they're trying to say that a lot of the anxieties in particularly in European and British and American far right circles about Vikings is that Viking men went out and basically acquired women, and it's their sexual predation that is fantasized about, because in the flip side, a lot of their far right discourse is about how foreign men will do the same to white women.
Yeah,
and I don't know. I've got to be careful with my words, so I don't want to get banned on the live. But this obsession with,
yeah,
at least
I know what you
it's
mean.
probably present in all white supremacists, but they were particularly saying it's a British and American obsession more than a Swedish one. They claim they did an online trawl of literature, this obsession with what men might do to women, but Vikings did it, yay, but immigrants, and they're obsessed with that violence, that violence towards women.
Yeah.
Does that ring bells? Does that relate to what you might
Yes,
have?
totally. Actually, now that you mention it, that was now they don't say it that much, But there was a time in Sweden politics that was a huge part of the discourse from both the Nordic resistance movement and the Sweden Democrats that these foreign men are gonna come and
Yeah.
they're taking our women, they're, our women and things like that. And it's not about that they care about the well-being of women. It's about that in white supremacy, women are seen as an object to perpetuate the white race. As simple as that. So if you want to have white babies, you need white women. So it's how they see the women as a thing, and also it's a way to it's something. But yeah, they use that as a huge thing. I don't think the Sweden Democrats do it that often lately, but there was a time, like for years, both this Nordic resistance movement, far right, and the Sweden Democrats is far right. Well, the Nordic resistance movement, they're Nazis, but the far right, they use that also as a, totally, I totally agree. I saw it.
So I think that's what I mean. I didn't make myself clear. I wasn't trying to say that necessarily there's a lot of women in the party. It's more the obsession with women.
I totally agree. It's an obsession with women. They have an obsession with women. And there was a time that they had this obsession that women, not because women are going to get rape, but more that women, these foreign men are going to take them away from them. And then you're going to have Sweden full of mixed kids. And there is this fantasy. Yeah, I see it. And yeah, about like they're women, and the latest election, it was more about like, oh, these women, they don't want us. There was like this very like this article, this opinion piece that became viral about a man complaining that white women didn't want to date him because he's openly like a fascist, and he was complaining about that.
Oh,
yeah,
it's so terrible. So I feel sorry for him.
It's very, very funny. It's very, very funny. So there's this like, I see it. I see it totally. It's part of the discourse. Like, our women, we have to protect our women, not because they want to be the ones doing the bad things. It's not about protecting women. It's about ours,
Yeah. So it's like commodification,
It's a commodification it's a complete commodification of white women. And this is something that like white women don't understand, because they think when we black women or women of color who consider ourselves like black feminists or things like that, or we talk from a decolonial perspective, they think we say it from a place of hate. We say it from a place of love and from a place that we're worried about. Even if you're treated as a prime cattle, you're still cattle. Even if you're treated as the most expensive cow and like prime cow from Ireland, purebred, certified, you're still a cow. So you need to be careful in these places. And like there's a lot of like also domestic violence, like women who are with this type of men, they experience a lot of domestic violence. And it's not like, I'm not saying like non-white men are perfect. We talk a lot about like also sexism in our communities. Like Audre Lorde talk about sexism in the black community. Bell Hooks talk about. Angela Davis also talk about it. What we're saying is that these men don't like you either, and yeah, they see them as things. They see them as objects, and I'm still, yeah, totally.
Do you a difficult question, and it's easy. I don't know. I don't want to encourage you to be optimistic or pessimistic. I just want to hear what you think. Do you think it's difficult to gain a sense? Is Sweden becoming? Are the far right winning? Are they taking over?
Yes, definitely. Oh, yeah, totally. Actually, we have the current government. We have is Moderaterna, the moderates. They're not moderates. They're right wings. They're neoliberal right wings. They work in collaboration with the Sweden Democrats. So the Sweden Democrats, even though they're not in the government, they have like a collaboration agreement with the government, right? Because the Sweden Democrats are the second biggest party in Sweden. So what they did in last elections is that, so the moderates and together with the liberals and the Christian Democrats, yes, always there's a Christian group in the mix. The Christian Democrats, they formed the government coalition, and then they got a vote of confidence from the Sweden Democrats, and they work in collaboration. But pretty much a lot of the laws, especially like anti-migrants and anti-refugee laws, are pretty much coming from the Sweden Democrats. So yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen in next elections. We'll see. But yeah, I think so that they, yeah, actually right now they are kind of like in a very comfortable position because they have a lot of power, but also they're not part of the government. So if they fuck it up, they blame the prime minister, who's a fucking coward. Ulf Kristersson is a racist coward piece of crap, pro genocide, pro. He's not pro Israel, or he's not pro Jewish people. He's just horrible person, and he's a coward, and he's spineless. And yeah, so yeah, but we have to be optimistic, because I believe personally that optimism is not about me. Optimism is about us. I'm not optimistic because of me. I'm optimistic because of us, because because we are. I am here. Like, no human is an island. I am here because we are here. So we need to be optimistic. And I believe I'm optimistic because, yeah, that's how I see optimism.
That's really, at one level I can't understand it. Another level I totally want that. Yeah, I totally agree with you. No, we can't. That's part of the victory, isn't it? Is we stop being hopeful, then we let this kind of discourse rule.
Yeah, totally. We have to be optimistic because we are. Yeah, exactly. I believe in that philosophy, the Ubuntu philosophy. I am because we are. So we're not alone. We don't exist because, like, as an isolated event. So I'm optimistic because I have to be optimistic for others, not only for me. So that's what I believe. And one of the reasons why I create content in English is, first, my Swedish is not very good. My Swedish is very, everyday life and things like that. I get very nervous when I talk Swedish in front of a camera, but also because Swedes don't like when you talk in English about what happens in Sweden. So it gives me a little, that people know outside of Sweden. So it's my opinion at the end. I don't represent Sweden. I don't represent Swedes.
No.
This is my
I don't
opinion.
represent anyone else either.
Perspective. Maybe I have a lot of bias. I have a lot of blind spots. Maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, you can correct me in the comments, as some people did respectfully. And I was like, yeah, you were right. Yeah. But yeah, that's the reason why I could do it in Swedish, but it's not as fun as, Yeah. They don't like when you talk about Sweden in English, because they don't like it. So I'm like, okay.
Well, I've had many a long-term Swedish friend, and they have their views of all different about politics and stuff. But I certainly have obviously been just observing this lurch further and further right over the long term, and I'm
but
still unsure.
But it's something that's been happening. It didn't happen out of nowhere. I think, like, Swedes are not very self-critical. I've noticed, like, I think I'm gonna say something that maybe a lot of people don't agree with me. Moving to Sweden as an adult is such a big privilege, because I think being an outsider gives you a very clear perspective of a lot of things. I like being an outsider. I think it's really, I mean, I'm not an outsider, but I am an outsider because I see things from an outside perspective. I see it as hurricanes. I grew up I'm Dominican, so we have hurricane season. So hurricanes, like, I don't know if you guys have been in the eye of a hurricane. I've been in the eye of a hurricane. The eye of a hurricane, everything looks peaceful and cool, but the only ones who can see what's happening is those who are in, like, the scientists who can see it from outside, and they're like, holy shit, you're in the eye of a hurricane. But if I am in the hurricane, I'm gonna be like, no, everything is fine. So sometimes having, like, an outside perspective is good. So I believe this was something that was in the making. Swedes are not very critical of their own history. They're not critical of their own things. They like to talk more about other countries, but the way I see Sweden is like, okay, Americans think, this is how I see it. Americans are like, I am the best because I'm American, but we are the best because we are Swedes. You know what I mean? Maybe they're not very like, I am the best because they believe in the Jantelagen philosophy that you don't need to stand out. We are all the best. We Swedes are the best. And it's very hard to talk because they're not very critical. They don't have like self-criticism. Like I live in England, and English people, it's easier to talk about like English politics with an English person or with an American person or with a Swede. Swedes are not critical at all. And this far right movement, it was something that happened very slowly. That started it a long time ago when a lot of parties started to move to the right. The way that Sweden sees migration and refugees, Sweden has zero critical thinking about their participation in the violence that happens in the global south and in the Middle East that creates refugees and migrants, because Sweden, there was a time that was one of the biggest weapon exports per capita, and they have been involved in a lot of things. Like, yeah, you're part of the problem. Don't complain about refugees when you are part of the problem. And also the way they treat Sami people, that's something that I haven't reckoned with. And also the way they talk about integration. I hate the word integration so much. You have no idea how much I hate how they talk about integration in Sweden. And this is not like a far right thing. This is all the political parties from the left to the far right. How they talk about integration is so racist, because Sweden doesn't have a problem with integration. Sweden has a problem with segregation. So the way they did is what they remove the talking about race in Sweden, ironically, is super hard. It's super hard. So they removed all of the from the equation. They move out racism. They move out the discussion about segregation. It's like, oh no, and they blame the victims. And oh no, the problem is not that we are a segregated society. The problem is that they don't want to integrate. And I was like, what do you mean about integrating? What do you want me to bleach myself and like and like I don't understand. So yeah, I know that wasn't about the topic, but going back to Vikings, I think like it's very neutral. I think a lot of people engage with our culture very positively, but Sweden, and I'm just gonna ignore that comment because I've talked about the thing about migrants in Sweden so many times. I've talked about that topic. And I'm just tired of talking about that topic over and over again. But yeah, so there's a lot of positive things people engage. But Sweden is mostly a Christian country.
Yeah.
People celebrate Midsummer every year, and it's not like the movie. It's very fun. So, and Sweden is a beautiful country. I strongly recommend people to come in the summer.
You say that, but I know it's really like the film.
You know, there was a part, maybe because I live in Sweden, that I didn't like about the movie. The forest, it didn't look like Scandinavian forest.
No.
Why didn't they film in a Scandinavian country? I was like, that's not a Scandinavian.
Just didn't have the right aesthetic, did it? It felt like North America. I don't know where they filmed it, but it felt like North America.
They film in Hungary.
Oh, right. It felt wrong anyway. It didn't quite have that.
It felt wrong. Why didn't they film here? Why didn't they film in a Scandinavian country? But yeah, Midsummer is very fun. I go every year to Midsummer celebrations. It's very, very, very beautiful. It's very fun, and Sweden is very beautiful, especially in the summer. You know, so I strongly recommend. And if you like ruins, don't go to the museums, because the best rooms are not in the museum. The best rooms are outside. Yeah. The one in Gamla Stan is very ugly, it's super small, but if you Google or if you ask tourists, they're gonna tell you, like touristic information centers, they're gonna tell you, yeah.
Well, I've kind of run out of steam of ranting about Vikings. I don't know about you, Mango Podcast, but I think I haven't looked through all the questions though, and I don't know if I should dare.
I'm just gonna say one last thing about Vikings. Like, it's not that serious. Like white supremacists are ruining Vikings for everybody. It's not that serious. Like Jesus Christ, seriously, like it's annoying. It's I mean it's dangerous because like turning things into symbols of white supremacy that you have to be careful about. But like yeah, totally. Like I don't know,
I
like
th-
white supremacy does that. Like they appropriate things and they turn them into themselves and symbols of hate and violence, and it's like it's not that serious. I mean, it's serious, but it's also like it's complex because all civilizations are complex and all human groups are complex. And they I think white supremacists just also on top of everything they show a very simplistic view of the world and the lore and the history, which is very like yeah.
Can I respond to more comments by Becky that I didn't
Yeah.
see earlier? I think
Yeah.
Becky is. I don't know. It's not a mutual of mine at the moment, but she assumes she's making the point that academia is very English orientated. Most scholars are from the West, and then there's another point she makes: Africa scholars are not given a chance. When we complain, they off us for being critical in thinking about the Viking Age. I have. I can't disagree. I can't. That's a double negative. I can't disagree with you. I think you are right that part of the problem is that the scholars are very white. There is a long bias of English focused Viking studies, even though Scandinavians do Viking studies, English language scholarship. So this book, which is a popular view to ancient Scandinavia that I was talking about, I want to show you the map for the Viking Age, right? And you tell me something wrong with it. And this has a Western bias and a Northern bias. Hang on, 1 second, because I think you'll find this funny. This book got water damage because my ceiling leaked, and so the pages are all scuffed up. But I'll show you the map. That's the map of the Viking Age. I know it'll be back to front, but there's some key things missing there. And one of the key things missing is Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, Asia.
Yeah.
It's basically Scandinavia, the British Isles, and the North Atlantic. And for me, when I saw that map, I went, holy shit, this is a book about Scandinavia. And most of the Swedish Viking routes are eastwards. So, and south. So when I see that, I'm not having to go at this scholar alone. Right, I'm just using this as a point of illustration. If you know him, go tell him I think he's crap. No, don't. I'm joking. No, but I'm saying we shouldn't be doing this. And this is 9 years old, so this is still new in academic terms. That's new, right? I know that.
Yeah.
But white scholars producing maps of the Viking world that doesn't even show. And then why are we surprised there are people online going, well, the Vikings had nothing to do with the Mediterranean. The Vikings had nothing to do with the Eastern river systems, the Arab world. And I'm only picking on one example, but we shouldn't be doing this shit. And if we were in actual conversation with scholars from other parts of Europe and the wider world, maybe we wouldn't be doing such mistakes. And I've made mistakes all the time too. I'm not trying to blame just other scholars. I'm saying we need to have more people of colour, more voices of different languages in our scholarship, or we're going to just that's my point.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe I don't know if quoting like articles is fair, like news articles, but this is from The Guardian from 2017. This is from The Guardian of 2017. So they said wait. This is from The Guardian 2017. Like university claims Viking burial clothes with Allah discovered in Sweden. They first thought it was like a sign of plunder. This is from The Guardian.
Yeah. This is a bit of a dodgy story actually. But go on. Tell me.
Yeah. Oh well, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
It was a bit of. They misunderstood it. I think there's been a debate about this, but it was all happening on social media, not in academic articles. But I think they backtracked from saying it was Allah because of. But certainly there's.
Okay.
I can't remember. I'll tell you. I promise you, I'll do a video on that because I can't remember the details, and I don't want to say something I'm without. But there is evidence of the Muslim links. Yes, we've got so many objects from the steppes and from the Scandinavia is flooded with Arab silver from the Abbasid Caliphate. So yeah, they're not necessarily all converting to Muslim, but they're exposed to those beliefs, and those materials. Sorry, yeah.
Oh no! You're the expert. I wanted to ask about it because I don't know that much about it because they
I will
don't
do a
talk
video.
about that much about it. So I would like to know more about it because they made it very very far. I mean
Yes.
they made it to the Mediterranean. I don't know how like, and also like this whole division, like this whole strict division that we have nowadays of the East and the West is very recent, like that's another thing that we need to keep in mind, that maybe that's a lot of bias that we have in that. So I mean that's something that I've learned, like this concept of this harsh line between the East and the West is very recent. So
And
that
given and one thing I haven't talked about on purpose, but we do need to just quickly flag up, is one of the reasons people are really sensitive about the Vikings at the moment is nothing to do with America. It's to do with Ukraine, Russia, and both nations see their origins in the Viking Age, and both are overtly using the Vikings in political propaganda. And while no one believes Putin's excuse for invading Ukraine as about denazification, there were far right groups using Viking symbolism for a pro-Ukrainian nationalism. So it's not that is nothing new either. The Eastern use of the Vikings in Slavic areas, Poland too. Nazis have used it there too. Extreme right wings. So there's all sorts of issues there. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of there's so many complicated aspects in political discourse about the Vikings, and it's not simply about America and Britain and Sweden. It's also about Ukraine, Russia, and
and the world. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Varangians in the Byzantine army, yes, the bodyguard of the emperors, yes, were at least partially made up of Scandinavians. But look, by the late 11th century, they were Anglo-Saxons, because the Anglo-Saxon elite were kicked out by the Normans, and many of them went to Byzantium. So there were many people speaking Old English settling around Crimea in the 11th century. The world was messed up, in those days, But I do have an image of sort of posh, that we see from the Bayeux Tapestry. The English all have these big moustaches, and I can imagine them all sitting there drinking their tea. I say, I do like the Crimea. Maybe we should, No, it's very complicated, is my point. But I don't have any. My brain is gone. I'm sorry, and I know that you're not a first language English speaker. It must be triply tough for you to keep going at these conversations. But I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add, or should we call it an evening?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I don't have anything else to say. Thank you so much for the opportunity. This has been a really, really amazing night, and thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's been fantastic. Could you drop me a line? I'll ask you, double check you're happy with this going on YouTube. It doesn't have to if you think it's too sensitive a topic or whatever. I don't mind. But if you'd like to, I'd love to be able to sort of share it on there afterwards. But
yeah, totally. Please be welcome. Thank you so much. And if I talk too much, I apologize. I'm sorry.
No. It's really important.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I've learned so much, and I really enjoy your content, and I learn a lot.
Likewise. And of course, the big fight, we're not, the thing that you're spending a lot of your content on, I'm not ignoring, apart from the fact they'll probably ban the live if we mention any names, but obviously,
totally, no,
totally respect and support your stance on that, and I really appreciate your voice on that. I really do.
Thank you. I'm very small, but thank you. I think it's not, but thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. Very interesting topic, and the only thing I'm gonna say is that just have fun with it. Don't take it so I don't know, so seriously. People don't put be careful with the bias. There's also, everybody brings their bias, but yeah. And Vikings didn't wear dreadlocks, okay? Vikings didn't wear dreadlocks. Please.
We know. Oh, my audience knows now, and hopefully, if we've got videos on this, there's no doubt. There's always someone who goes,
when you mention Vikings and dreadlocks in the same sentence, the internet goes crazy.
But there's always someone going, but I bet there was one somewhere. And I just go, most topics I always go, almost every other topic I go, oh yeah, but this one I just go, no. No evidence. You know, it's not complicated. They may have also worn tutus and ridden dinosaurs, but they didn't because we've got no evidence. You know, you can make up any fantasy you want.
Yeah, and even if they did, like as I mentioned before, you're from Ohio, you're not a Viking. Even if they did, that has no connection with you. You don't have no cultural connection. You have, even if you are, like, that's not how it works. You know, it's like, so are you gonna, because you're French, are you gonna start wearing, like, I don't know, like Baroque makeup and elaborate costumes, like from like 300, 400 years ago? Like, that's not how the world works, you know?
Oh dear. Well, thank you again, Mango Podcast. It's been wonderful. If you don't already, follow Mango Podcast, and they've got a podcast. So you know,
Yeah.
But we shall chat again, I'm sure. But thank you so much, and thank you all, audience, for comments. And I'll see you another time. Sadly, we're all going to die. But while you're waiting, why not follow Archaeodeath? Subscribe now on YouTube.